Okay. All right. It says that we are live. So
Great.
Everybody, here's Connor. Hi, Connor.
Hi, Annie. How's it going?
Good. I was thinking about this last week, that when I start these coffee chats, we're kind of in a room together before. And so like when you do a normal coffee chat, like you obviously would start with like, hey, how's it going? But then we start the stream and we've already kind of like skipped that part. So we get right into it. And so then I was like, should I like ask Connor how he's doing? Should I not ask Connor how he's doing? So this was my middle ground. And good answer for that. But have you ever been on like a live thing before? Or is this your first time going live talking to people?
I think this is the first time being live on some sort of stream. Yeah, this is the first time. So I'm excited to be here.
Well, if you are there in the comments right now, let us know, drop a hello. We got like a 10-second delay, but I try and like spotlight people's comments who come through, because we can't see who's viewing at all, and we can't usually see how many people are viewing either. So just like say hello if you're here, let us know you're here. But yeah, let's get started. I looked at your profile and everything a little harder than I think I normally look at people's profile. Just because I know that you're searching for a job right now, and I want
that bad.
It
demands extra attention.
No, it was interesting, but I'm curious about like something that I find really interesting is understanding people's backgrounds and how they got into data, because a lot of times people will ask me, hey, can I get into data if I was an X? And so, or if I'm an X. And I like to kind of collect data on like, oh, I know someone who was a truck driver. I know someone who was a nanny, all these things. So like, what were you doing before you got into data, or were you always kind of a data person?
Yeah, I've always enjoyed data, but I kind of fell into it. And so I, in college, didn't really know what I wanted to do. Knew I wanted to get an undergrad. So I chose to do international business because I speak some Spanish, and wanted to focus on that and take Spanish courses and whatnot. And so I graduated, but right before I graduated college, for a course I needed an internship, and finding an internship is really difficult, and it was really difficult back then too. And so I got an internship doing some accounting work, and really enjoyed working in Excel. Had a great time doing that. Got a little bit of exposure to VBA, and like writing, using almost like Excel logic to build front end like tax documents and whatnot. And I kind of really just fell into it. Graduated college, they offered me a full-time job, stuck around, and there were two people at that company. There was a sales data analyst and a marketing data analyst. And I really liked what they were doing. Also, John Hackamack was working at the company. I really liked what John was doing.
I was just going to ask if you knew him, because you have such a similar story.
Yeah, we worked at
you knew him personally.
Yeah, we both live local. We're like 25 minutes from each other, and we both worked at Canopy Tax for a period of time. So anyways, I saw what people were doing with SQL and data analysis, and thought, man, that's really cool. I want to transition into that. And so I kind of just self-taught myself SQL. I had the Excel like background, taught myself some SQL, got a little bit into Tableau, and then got my first job doing Tableau and data analysis in SQL. And so kind of just like a lot of people out there, you know, they want to make the transition into data. I kind of came from an accounting background somewhat, and haven't looked back since.
Interesting. I think an interesting theme is that every person that I've coffee chatted with that was an entry-level data analyst, they were in some other career before they got into data. And then every senior analyst I've talked to so far kind of just like went from college into data. So that's an interesting trend. Oh, John's in the comments. It was so funny, because I was like, there's no way you guys have to know each other. That's so cool. So when you got into data, were you like, okay, this is it, like this is the direction, like this is the direction that I want my career to go in? Were you thinking about like other paths? Like, how did you feel when you got into data?
I knew that it was right for me. And I don't view data as like a stepping stone necessarily to get into other things. Some people view it as a way to get into software development or data science or, you know, leadership. I knew that I liked working with numbers, and I liked impacting business performance. I really enjoy learning about companies that are really successful and what makes them, you know, have an edge over other companies and whatnot. And so data was kind of the way for me to learn like how to make a company run and how to impact business. And so it's like this perfect blend to me of working with numbers and working with other people. I really enjoy that part of it, that, I get to interact with stakeholders every day and work on solving problems, but also I get to, do some deep work, have a 3-hour coding block where I just work and code something and build something cool. And so data is this like perfect thing for me. It just really works. And I think that resonates with a lot of people. It's those that have like an analytical mind seem to gravitate towards analytics and whatnot, and they do well in that field.
Yeah, I agree. I like all the things that you said. I feel the same way. Actually, I was looking at your LinkedIn. Oh, I don't have it up anymore, but you had on there. It was interesting. Look at your LinkedIn for anyone who hasn't. Like it was like your resume, but like expanded. Like it was like an awesome. Like looking at your experience, I was like, oh, this is like a resume, but like more. But there was like consulting on like data strategy and stuff. And I think that's so cool. And I just like curious, how did you get into that? Like, can you tell me more about that? Because I think that's so cool.
Yeah, it's definitely an emerging thing that I'm doing. I've been doing it for about like a little over a year now, and super, super part-time. There's like 2 companies I've worked with helping them work out data strategy. One company they wanted to hire their first data person. They had no idea how to go about that, what positions they should fill. And so it was actually a friend of mine who reached out to me who works at that company, just needed help on kind of strategizing what their future in data looked like. And so we talked about where their data was at, how it was housed, kind of got an idea that there is some, like the software developers had organized it into a data warehouse, which is great, but it wasn't in a great format for reporting. And so it needed data modeling, and they needed data visualization and some ETL work. And so I was able to suggest to them, hey, like you need an analytics engineer or a data engineer. It looks like the position that you should hire for. This is kind of what your next 5 years could look like. And so that's kind of one of the opportunities I've had in kind of consulting, and it's been fun. And then another opportunity I've had is just helping a company with their SQL work. They needed just data modeling done. And so I wrote some SQL code for them, specifically in Zoho Analytics, which is kind of interesting. It's not a platform I'd worked with before. So that was kind of a learning curve. That's part of consulting, is you spend half the time figuring out what the heck is going on, where their data is housed, what tools they're using, and then you're able to like impact the business on the other half. And so I know some people really don't like data consulting. It can be a grind. Sometimes you have to work 20 hours after working a 50-hour week at your normal job. And so I'm trying it out. We're going to see how it goes. For those that don't know, I got laid off last week. Really poor timing with that. And so this consultancy stuff, if I can get it going a little bit, might be a good interim thing to spend my time on.
Yeah, I mean, like Dylan Anderson on LinkedIn, he is a consultant full-time. He does the data strategy stuff. So like, I mean, I'm a consultant. I think you know that, and I love it. I think it's great. Like what you said, with every time you get a new project, you have to learn like new tools, new databases. Like I was trying to write a custom SQL query today in Tableau. I had to figure out like, oh, they're using like this database, and so like for example, MySQL and PostSQL, like that would have different syntax, and like those little things. I think that's so cool because I love to learn. But if you don't love to learn all the time, then that's maybe not the right path. Yeah. So yeah, let's talk about this layoff. Did you like see it coming? Like, do you feel like you prepared for it well, or was it like, oh no?
Yeah, the writing was on the wall. I was at the company about just over 3 years, and I think I saw 4 layoffs during that time. And so I think there were some struggles happening for sure. But the last month, starting early, like mid-March, there was some writing on the wall. Some things happened that I probably I'm not allowed to talk about, but one thing led to another, and it was like obvious that they were going to have to drastically change their business model. And as an analyst, I'm able to kind of like look at the numbers and see, okay, if we cut this portion of the business out, what's going to be remaining after? And it's like, not much is going to be remaining after this. And so I have been kind of passively looking for jobs for the last month, and then actively for the last week looking for jobs. And so kind of, I you always think you're going to be safe when, you hear about a layoff coming. You're like, oh, I'm probably fine. I've been at the company 3 years. I'm a little bit more tenured than others, and so we'll be okay. But sometimes layoffs come, and it's like half the company's let go, and what can you do? You're part of that, and so it's unfortunate. But I'm glad to be in the position I am now, where I have a little bit more experience, and so I am finding that it's a little bit easier to get interviews. And also I've been actively using LinkedIn for like the last 9 months, trying to build my network and outreach. And that has helped a ton. I have half a dozen interviews and whatnot coming up. And it's mainly just from my network. Like I've cold applied to probably 50 jobs now, and tried, messaging recruiters at the company and trying messaging, data people at the company, and nothing has come of it. But from the network, lots of things have happened. So that's good.
Yeah, I talk a lot about, well, I think a lot of us talk a lot about like building your brand on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a really good example because there's this idea that like what we see on LinkedIn when we create content is how many impressions it's gotten, right? And how many people have seen our posts. And I learned a while ago that like that doesn't really matter when it comes to like you're trying to build a personal brand that like is going to support you into the future and like getting a job, being layoff proof. It doesn't matter how many people see your posts. It matters like this brand that you built. Like, do people trust you that like you've got good content and like you know what you're doing, or do you have like 200 people following you because you like made a post about how like all you need to do is learn Excel, SQL, and Tableau? Like those posts are fine, but I've been thinking a lot about how like if you really want to build a brand that's going to get you a job, you have to like go deeper. So do you think your content, like these connections, like did you know them? Did they just like know from what you were posting that you like had the skills? Like how did your connections actually know, oh, I think this guy's worth recommending?
Yeah, so I agree with you that LinkedIn can be a little bit superficial, I think, because I have, X number of followers, but the only people that were like sending me referrals and sending jobs my way seem to be people that I've interacted with before. They're not just, blind followers who are just following me because I post data memes. It was people who I've interacted with their content, or like I've worked with them at prior jobs, as well as like reaching out to local people. I think is important if you're trying to build a LinkedIn network to help you like job search, because, local companies are, if they're not fully remote, they only want to look at people who are local. And so that helps me out to like network with people who are local. And so I try to focus on that as well. And so to answer your question, yeah, like it's only people who I've interacted with before that have helped. It's not the superficial people who have just followed because I post data memes, which is totally fine. If that's why you follow me, you just want to laugh every once in a while when I have a good joke. That's totally fine. That's why I post memes.
Yeah. So what kind of things now have you been doing? Did you kind of revisit your portfolio now that you know your job searching? Did you
Yeah,
do it?
I have. Yeah, there's a lot of things I got rid of that I felt like were less advanced that I'd built before, and I've been trying to focus on things that I feel like I'm great at, like SQL work, and then as well building my portfolio with things that I'm less comfortable with. Like I want to build a project in R. R is a programming language that I've hardly ever touched, and so that's something on my to-do list as well, is to beef up the portfolio with things that I'm not so great at, so that I feel more comfortable with them and I can speak intelligently about them if it comes up in an interview. And so, yeah, I've been revisiting the portfolio. I built my own website as well, which, you can use. There's a lot of different ways. I think Card is one site people use to build a link tree or a website. And I just bought a domain with my name, just cause, and have been building that up and revamping it. And it's interesting. You had posted my resume the other day, and it's like everyone has different opinions on resumes. It's hard to check all the boxes for everybody, because some people is like, I don't like that you did this on your resume, Connor. And it's like, I actually really like that. I think it's a smart thing to do for this reason. And so I'm trying my best to like revamp the portfolio and my resume to check as many boxes as possible so that job searching is easier.
Yeah, I saw a couple of comments on your resume and I was like, oh, this isn't my resume. I wasn't posting it for feedback. It was just that's not the direction I want us to go. But I think that like also going back to what I saw on your LinkedIn profile and everything, like you had really good stuff. And I think it's probably more critical for like an entry level person that they have to, nail everything in some, because if you're entry level and you don't have any data analytics experience, you really have to do kind of dress things up.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like you've got experience and you can just say like, hey, this is what I've done. And it doesn't require a lot of like, and this is how it relates to data analytics,
Yeah. I totally felt that way when I was trying to break into data analytics. I felt like I had to not fib, but like, kind of stretch the truth a little bit in order to be able to say that I've used Tableau before. It's like, okay, I've built one dashboard in Tableau. That's my Tableau experience. But it's true. Once you have more experience, people just assume that, okay, he's worked in data for 3-4 years. He must have worked with SQL. He doesn't have to describe every SQL function that he knows. I can just say that I have an advanced SQL background, and hopefully that's good enough. I don't know. Maybe I should, get a little bit more in detail with my resume and whatnot.
That's what your portfolio is for, right? Like your
resume
is in the place for those things, and like being able to say, I've done SQL at my job for X number of years means something. I mean, I have actually talked to a couple of people who were like, yeah, I'm searching for like senior level analyst roles, but I only use Excel and I don't want to learn SQL. And I'm like, good luck with that. I think that's going to be a hard job search for you if you don't want to learn SQL. I liked one of your portfolio projects. I saw that you had put in your README on your GitHub, the Fivetran one. You had put screenshots and like really detailed it all out through your README, which is like a ton of work. But I thought that was great. I was like, oh, that means I don't have to do any work to like read your project. I can just see what you've done in your project. Yeah, that's really cool. Do you have any tips for people on like that portfolio stuff?
Man, I'm not convinced that GitHub is the best place to host a portfolio. I know that's a lot of people choose other things. I just have seen there's a few portfolios I've seen of other people where they used the README on GitHub to have screenshots and then, their code or their processes that they went through or the reasons that they're doing it. And so I really like that format. And as well, I feel like in maybe 1 in every 4 or 5 applications you fill out, it asks for a GitHub link. And so I don't know. I put it on GitHub. I know GitHub Lab some people use, and there are other tools as well, but I'm still trying to figure out the best place. So if anyone in the comments has a suggestion on their favorite place to put their portfolio, let us know. I'd love to see it.
What I did with mine, I had mine on Wix. I saw Maven Analytics has their portfolio site now, which is free. And I think like I recommend that to entry-level data analysts because like I think it's great. And like you don't need to learn how to build a whole website on top of like learning how to write SQL and everything. But what I did for mine before it came out was I had it on Wix and I had like a projects page. And so as an entry-level data analyst, usually the thing that you're showing off can probably be like highlighted in a screenshot. I'm not sure about more advanced projects where you're really thinking about data modeling, all this stuff. But for entry-level stuff, it's like you're showing your joins and you're showing your Tableau dashboard. So I would just put a screenshot of it and then like a description of the project. And then I would link to my GitHub if it was like SQL or my Tableau public if it was on Tableau. So it was kind of like this landing site to like send people other places. Yeah.
That's smart. Yeah. Because I have built out some data modeling and visualization in Mode just to show that I know that software. It's a data visualization tool. And it's like I was struggling to figure out how to get it onto GitHub. And so maybe having a link to it, built out on my website might be a good idea on how to do that.
Yeah. Do you think that people are actually looking at your portfolio? Because I personally found like I would talk to people and I was like pretty sure they hadn't looked at my portfolio. They just like I just ended up talking to them about my portfolio.
I have never in an interview had a recruiter or a hiring manager call out something from my portfolio. I don't think that's ever happened that I can remember. But you're able to see in Tableau Public how many people have seen your, your site, like your homepage with all your visualizations. And so I'm able to go on there and see that, 100 people have seen it. Now, when did that happen? Who was it? I don't know. But that's such a great question. I'm not sure. My guess is that maybe a box is checked saying that a portfolio was linked to, and maybe they glance at it really quickly. But I don't know if anybody is really diving in depth into your code unless maybe you're at like an advanced, like you're towards the very end of the interviewing process, and they just want to double check that, like they want to check your references and they want to check that your portfolio is real and not faked, to make sure that you're a good hire. I could see that happening.
Yeah, I know somebody who got a job recently, and she said that when she went in for like an in-person thing, I guess they had things planned out to ask her, and then she got there and they were like, "Oh, we looked at your portfolio and actually answered all of our questions."
Really? That's cool.
Okay, cool. So like, what am I doing here? They're like, "We're just chatting."
That's really cool.
Yeah, so that was cool. I mean, for me, like I had like pretty much nobody talk about my portfolio, but then when I was in for this job that I got, I was in my first interview with my now boss, and I was talking about a project that I had done, and he said, "I've got your portfolio pulled up here, your Tableau portfolio, because it's a Tableau consultant job." He said, "I haven't looked at it anything yet, but tell me what project you're referencing and we can look at it together." So that was kind of the closest that I came on that one.
That's really cool. That's great. I'll have to let people know if people do bring up my portfolio.
Yeah. Yes, I would like to hear it. Make a post about it, please.
Yeah, I'll for sure do it.
So have you had any, so you said you've had a couple of interviews. Have you like gotten past the phone screen stage on interviews yet? Are you getting into the meat of it, or is that where you are for now?
Yeah, I've had 2 phone screens and 2 follow-ups set up with hiring managers coming up. I have 2 more phone screens coming. And then, like I mentioned, I started interviewing maybe a month ago. And so I'm towards the later end stage with one company that I, fingers crossed, something works out there because they're really cool. But we'll see.
So what are the interviews like, and how are they different than the interviews for your first jobs?
That's a good question. And the phone screens are very similar. I feel like the purpose of a phone screen, a recruiter wants to see that you're a real human being, that you can speak intelligently about your background. They want to know, they often will ask like, how many years of experience do you have working with this tool or that tool or that tool? That also is often asked in the application process. And so I feel like things like that come up a lot. And since I have years of experience with these tools, there's no follow-up questions. They're just like, okay, great. You've worked with SQL for 4 years. Sounds good. And so I think maybe there are less questions being asked to like really see if I'm, telling the truth about what's on my resume or what's on my portfolio. And so that's kind of nice. Maybe it's a little bit easier. I feel like oftentimes that first phone screen can just be like, the phone call ends with, "Hey, it sounds like you know your stuff. I'm going to definitely recommend you to the hiring manager." While as before, when interviewing, it took maybe a little bit more time for them to make a decision after the phone screen. But I've found a common thread, and it seems like in later interviews, it seems like they always want to hear you, not always, but frequently they want to hear you talk through a problem that you solved or a project that you worked on. They want to hear like from front to end, what are all the steps that you took to solve a problem or to, model some data or build a report or whatnot. And so I recommend anybody to have a couple of those in mind, maybe one for each tool or one for each type of problem that they're working on. Because it's great to have those like just on the top of your mind or in your notes on your screen while you're interviewing so that you can talk about it. Because that is often where they want to see your ability to explain something technical in simple terms. And they want to see as well that you can speak intelligently about these things and you actually know how to use SQL or Tableau or Python or whatever it is. And so that would be my recommendation. That seems to come up often. And I'm anticipating that coming up more often since I'm getting through these phone screens in my job seeking process.
And And so who are you having these conversations with? Is it recruiters who don't have a lot of analytical knowledge, or the hiring managers who like know Python very well or whatever?
Seems always hiring managers. I don't feel like that happens often with recruiters in the first phone call. That's more just questions about what tools you're used to working with. They don't ask for specific examples of you using the tools. That definitely comes more often from the hiring manager.
Do you think have you gotten any take-home projects yet? Do you think you're going to get any take-home projects?
I know that one was talked about in one of the interviews that I had. I've done them. I did a few take-home projects last time I was job searching, like 3 years ago. And so I anticipate there will be some take-home homework projects. I think it'll come up.
Mm-hmm. So you may, this is like putting you on the spot more so even than just a live, but something I've been thinking about for myself personally is that when you go through job interviews, the whole point is to be able to really express what value you bring to the business. So
Mhm.
like you have like an elevator pitch for like what about you would make you a valuable candidate or employee?
Do you want to hear it? Is that
Yeah,
Sure.
if you don't mind.
Yeah, I think my strength lies in that I have both technical skills and interpersonal skills. I, as a data analyst, have frequently worked with many stakeholders, from marketing to sales to the executive team to product. I've worked with lots of them and been able to take complex topics and distill it into easy to understand terms and outcomes and analysis. And so I have that ability to work with others really, really well, and an ability to work through really technical problems. I have no problem putting my head down and working through a Python script for a couple of days straight, and coming up with solutions that, to a problem that we don't know how to solve. I like doing both. I think a balance between the two is a perfect job to me. If I'm at a job where I'm only in meetings all day long, that's not going to be very fun to me. Or if I'm at a job where I never interact with other people and I only work through coding problems all day long, that's not going to be very fun to me either. And so I feel like my unique strength is that I'm great at both, at almost equal parts, I would say, like 50-50 of where my skills lie. And so that that blend makes me a little bit unique and is perfect for data analytics and analytics engineering as well.
Yeah. And it also like means that you don't necessarily need to be told the why. Like if you were just into coding, people would tell you, okay, I need you to do this, but you wouldn't necessarily have a good eye on the why for the business.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree with that?
I do definitely agree with that. One of my problems why I don't do software engineering is I feel like that happens often. It's the product managers that are making the decisions on what they build. And it's the executives of the company that decide that. And sometimes this isn't always true, but at some companies, you're just one of 50 software developers who's, tasked with building out some feature. And you don't get to, be a part of the conversations as often as you might like, with making up, like choosing the why, like you were saying, and finding the reason behind it. And like I had talked about earlier, I like impacting businesses and helping businesses make data-driven decisions. And so data analytics, you get to do both. You get to solve problems, you get to work with stakeholders, you get to help impact the direction that the company is going, and you get to work on cool stuff and build cool shit on the back end. And so I think it's a great mix of the two, and I really like it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. This week I had my boyfriend came home last night and he was like, hey, how was your day? I was like, I did what I consider to be like the highest level of my favorite thing to do at my job today. He was like, okay, do tell. Like, we had this whiteboarding session for an existing customer who wanted to add another dashboard to the list of dashboards that I'm building. And it was this scoping. I use Figma for whiteboarding, which is really cool. I have like a whiteboarding template built out that already has like bar charts and all the different types of charts that I would need, and like KPI box, so I can just drop it in. And I was like, okay, so who is the end user and what format are they using it in? And, what is the problem that you're solving for the end user with this dashboard? And then what action are they going to take from it? And we kept like coming back to that in the meeting. And it was super cool because they were great customers. They like were like, oh, I trust your judgment on these things. But like
Mhm.
I would bring them back to like, we'd be like, oh, well, this would be a really cool place for a scatter plot. And we'd talk about it and I'd be like, okay, but like, how is this solving the problem, and bringing it back to that? And they're like, oh my gosh, you're so right. And I was like, yes, I love this.
That's great. Now that feeling of like we're solving problems or we're making an impact, and we're not just blindly taking what the stakeholder wants built. Instead, we're challenging their ideas and improving them. And at the end, you're going to come up with something way better because of it.
Yeah. There's this question here. I think you can probably see it on the highlight. It says, how do you gauge what the company culture is from discussing things with a hiring manager? And what are some of the good green flags that instill confidence for you that it's a good fit? So would be interested in your comments on that.
That's a really good question. Most companies have like corporate values, and I feel like they're fluff 90% of the time. They'll say teamwork and hard work and dedication. We're diligent, and most of the time, I think that they're just fluff. They just exist to put on the company's About Us page. And so I like to pull some out, like before I interview with somebody, and challenge that and say, is your company really humble? Like you put humble in your corporate values. Is that true? Can you give me an example of it? And that often will spark a discussion that helps me understand the company culture. As well, a great way to gauge company culture is to ask how long the team members have been on the team for. If people have been around more than 2 years, more than 5 years, these are great signs. If everybody on the team has only been there for 18 months or less, that's not as great of a sign unless it's a new company or a rapidly growing company, in which case that's, acceptable. And so those are things I look out for. What else about company culture? I think you can gauge as well if you have the opportunity to go into an office, which isn't always possible with remote work, but if you can go into the office and see, you can tell what kind of company culture is there. If people are, just heads down, grinding, doing lots of work, that can be a good sign. That can also be a bad sign. If nobody is in the office, that could maybe mean that things aren't going so well at the company. They've got lots of empty desks. That could be a bad sign. And so things like that are good. Glassdoor is a great way to tell as well. People can anonymously on Glassdoor leave reviews of companies. And so that anonymity allows people to really speak their minds about what the company is like. And so check out Glassdoor for any job you're considering, and it'll help you kind of gauge culture. Annie, do you have any ideas on how else you can gauge culture at a company?
Yeah, it's a good question. I talked a lot about it when I was job searching because I was coming out of a field, occupational therapy, where I was seeing in real time how like you as a worker really are not treated well. Like I was in my last fieldwork placement, I was at an assisted living facility, and my person who was above me, she was pregnant, and she had to take PTO time in order to go to doctor's appointments. And she, whenever she was gone, she would like be stressed the whole time because she's like, I don't know if someone's actually going to cover my caseload. And then when I come back, they're going to have progress notes that are still due on that day. And I was like, there was one time that they did like a brunch for all the nurses, like to like give them free food. And they were like, the like boss was like throwing shade at the physical therapist and occupational therapist for like wanting to come because they're like, you're not nurses. And so I was like, this idea that I can work at a company with like really good culture was really exciting for me. And I think something that looking back, I didn't have any idea how to figure it out back then. But I think some things that I'd be curious about is asking somebody like, hey, when's the last time you took a vacation? That's one.
Yeah.
And like, what is your balance of like, how many hours do you work a week, and like when you're expected to work. Something that I love about my role is that I don't have to work 9 to 5. And so like, I can go grocery shopping during the day, and then like on Sunday, I can catch up on some hours if I need to. And I know people who have worked at companies that are like, they haven't enjoyed their experience, and they're almost every time they have been expected like from 9 to 5. Everyone in the company, Jess was on my coffee chat recently. She said everyone in the company used to take their lunch break at the same hour. They would all log off and then log on at the same time. And that for me is actually a red flag on company culture, because if they
Mhm.
micromanage you to that level, then like
Yeah.
they don't trust you. Yeah, and I actually, like, on the flip side, I ended up accidentally ending up at a company with really good company culture, and
Mhm.
I realized when when the layoffs were happening, I didn't get laid off, but when it started, I realized like I feel like a lot of loyalty to my company, and that's almost a little bit dangerous, because at the end of the day, like you can't mistake a good company culture for like family or anything. Like just because your company
Mhm.
like, wants to treat you well doesn't mean that they'll like just cut you when they don't need you anymore. You
Yeah.
know?
I think there are two like worded red flags for me, and your comment there reminded me of it. Like if a company says we're a family, that's a red flag.
Mhm.
You don't want to work with your family members. You want to work with colleagues and associates. So that's definitely a red flag. Another red flag to me is work hard, play hard. I feel like that,
Mhm.
you can't really dictate how your employees play. And so if you're saying we play hard, then I don't know, something's a little weird about that to me.
Mhm. Yeah.
Is it?
So, what are you looking for? Okay. Okay. I guess this is two questions, and I guess I will
Mhm.
not answer that. Not ask that one first. I'll ask the other one first. The analytics engineer thing. I'm super curious when you put that in your headline and stuff. Like, what does that mean to you when you're saying I'm also an analytics engineer? Like, what does that actually mean?
Yeah, I think an analytics engineer is a great progression for a data analyst. The way that I see analytics engineer, it's like a perfect blend of a data engineer, not perfect, but it's a somewhat blend of the responsibilities of a data engineer and a data analyst. Data engineers, do more technical work with data warehousing, data pipelines, ETLs, data modeling. And an analyst works more closely with stakeholders. They solve business problems. They build reports and dashboards, and they work in SQL. And so an analytics engineer is kind of a blend of the two. The reason I put analytics engineer in my title is because that's kind of where some of my responsibilities lied at my prior job. My title was technically senior data analyst, but I did a lot of work. I had several projects where we pipelined data from different sources into our database, and then we did a lot of data modeling, writing stored
Mhm.
procedures, building database tables, building database views. We had a plethora of data, but it all needed reorganization and needed to be cleaned before we were able to use it. And so that's where some of the work that I really enjoy lied, was in taking dirty data that's in a bad format and formatting it better and creating a view, a table, a model that we can then use to consistently build reports that standardize metrics across the company. And so analytics engineers kind of that's how I would describe it, a mix of the two, some data engineering skills and data analytics skills. It is kind of an emerging job title. It's not as common.
Mhm.
I think I hadn't heard of it before, maybe like a year and a half, 2 years ago.
Mhm.
And so I put it in my title because it's not as easy to find those jobs, but if I can find a
Mhm.
job that's kind of along those lines, I think that would be great for me.
Yeah, I think that's actually the exact direction that I'd like to go in.
Yeah, it
So
sounds
it's
like
super
it.
cool. But I also like, it does seem like it's really hard to find. So somebody asked this question before we move on. They said, how do data engineers differ from data scientists? Or are they somewhat synonymous? And I definitely do not think that they're synonymous. Figured we'd answer that before we move on.
I agree with you there. They're not synonymous. In my opinion, a data engineer is more focused on the data collection and data storing portion of the data lifecycle. Data is created, it's collected, it's stored, it's analyzed, and then you can do like predictive analytics and whatnot, prescriptive analytics after that. And a data scientist, they kind of live on the other end, though many data scientists have the skills to be a data engineer, and vice versa. Many data engineers that I know could also be considered data scientists. But data scientists are similar to analysts in that they're driving business value, they're working with stakeholders, they're just employing specifically machine learning to solve business problems.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah.
Mhm.
I agree with that, but you articulated it better than I could.
I'm sure not.
So my question was like kind of on the next. So how are you looking for? I know you said like through your network and everything, but in general, like what are you looking for in a job in terms of like do you want it to be only remote? Are you good with hybrid? Like, what tools do you really like using? Like, what are you looking for?
I love remote work. As you can tell, I'm at home now, and I love working from home. I think it's great. It works really well for me. Like I've talked about before, I'm a pretty social person, and I waste a lot of the day chatting with others while at the office. And so while I'm at home, I'm forced to focus, which is great. As well, I hate commuting. It is my least favorite thing in the world.
Mhm.
And nothing is worse than me than looking back at the week and seeing I wasted 10 hours commuting this week. An hour to work, an hour back, 5 days a week. That's horrible to me. And so working from home, I don't have to do that. Similar to you, Annie, I like not working the 9 to 5. I like working 7 to 3 personally. I like waking up early, and I like having the afternoon and evenings to spend time with family, to go hiking, to play volleyball, whatever it is. And so remote work is definitely one of my most important things. I don't mind hybrid work. If I have to go in the office a couple of days a week somewhere local that's not too far of a drive, that's fine. Not a problem. And so the problem with applying to remote positions is that they get way more applications.
Mhm.
It's open up to the whole country or the whole world. And so they're going to get 10 times, 1,000 times, 100 times more applications than local companies would. And so I am first focusing on the network, not being quite as specific about the hybrid versus non-hybrid. I would be a little bit more picky maybe if I currently was employed, but as having recently got laid off because of a mass layoff, I am being less picky. And so if it's more days of the week in the office, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. I've done it for years. I can do it. It's definitely not my preference. And so, yeah, like first thing I look for is like, look at the network, talk with people that I know, look at their companies, see if they're hiring, then message them and say, hey, this role is open at your company. Can you put in a good word for me? And then as well, people like just posting on LinkedIn saying, hey, I'm open to work. And people have been messaging me about roles. And so using the network is probably the most important thing to me right now. Second is probably the type of work that it is, whether it's remote or hybrid or fully in the office. And then later down on the list, which is kind of funny, is probably the title of the job. Like I'm not going to get, like if someone's trying to hire a lead data scientist, like I don't have that skill set. And so I'm not quite worried about that. I don't think my network is going to try to push something to me that's like that, because they kind of know my skills and it's very clearly put on my profile what I can do. But yeah, I think analytics engineer would be my most important, like the best job title I could get would be analytics engineer. Senior data analyst is another one. And then if it's a data engineer or data scientist role, I'm fine with that too.
And what kind of things, like actually doing things at the job, would you like to be doing?
That's a good question. I'd love to be able to work closely with stakeholders. I'd love to be able to solve business problems. I really want to get better at my ETL skills. There are some tools that I have yet been able to work with, like Snowflake, AWS, Redshift. I've like studied them and done like portfolio projects with them, but I haven't actually used them on the job just quite yet, which is unfortunate because they're pretty standard. But having the experience to be able to work with those on the job would be really great. And then just, get better at SQL and Python. There's always room for improvement. I feel very comfortable with both of them, but be able to up my skills even more at the next role would be really great. I would be remiss if my next role was a position where I didn't learn anything new or didn't progress or grow at all. That'd be kind of lame. I'm not quite about that. That's a common trend in data is, continual progression and learning. And that's important to me too.
Yeah, you said in a post, I think today, that you had a role that you were interviewing for and you kind of stopped halfway through. Was that because you just kind of didn't really see a good progression for you in that role?
I think it actually, there would be a ton of progression, but it was in the wrong direction. It would push me more towards being a software engineer, which is great. And software engineering is amazing and the pay is great. But that's not quite the route that I want to go. And so it was really fun to interview and it was a great company. Like if it was a different role, I would really seriously consider it. But sometimes you get halfway through an interview and you hear stakeholder, not stakeholder, well, stakeholder, yeah, the hiring manager, describe the job, and you're like, that doesn't sound like what I want to do. And in this instance, chose to just end the interview early because I just knew I wasn't going to accept an offer, and I didn't want to waste their time nor my time. And so that's totally an option you can do. It is, me saying that kind of does sound a little bit privileged. I know that some people, they have to take any job they can get. They have to take any interview they can get, and that's totally fine. Sometimes jobs, you have to have one job for 6 months before you can transition into a better one. And so that's totally an option. It's just in my specific instance, it was better to stop the interview.
Yeah, I think it's really good that you acknowledge that, because I think that I sometimes see posts about people being like, oh, these are my green flags or my red flags for companies. And obviously it's a scam, that's a red flag. But like, other than that, I think that it's really tough to get a foot in the door in data. I actually had interviewed for a position that seemed like the actual job description was data analyst. And then when I got into the interview, they started saying, oh, well, you'd be doing this and you'd be doing that. I'm like, okay, well, none of that was in the job description. I'm glad that I still had it available.
Yeah.
Like, it was actually more heavily a project manager job than a data analyst job, just kind of mixed them together. And I remember being so on the fence because I thought there was a good chance they were going to offer me the job. But they're like, yeah, we do basically everything is live. You're kind of on calls all day and you're kind of just managing things. And you might do a little bit of Tableau work. And I was like, I really don't know what I'm going to do if they offer me a job, because it gets my foot in the door of the industry and that's amazing. But it's not what I want to do. I ended up accepting my job before they got a chance to either offer me a job or not. But it's definitely really tough when you're getting your first job. Some people will say, what should I do in order to get a data analyst job? Should I get a data entry job? And I'm like, no, that's I do not recommend that. Somebody actually asked in the comments about this one, based on your previous experience with a data team, what has been your experience with business intelligence? Does it differ from data analyst? Does BI provide a good foundation for a future transition to a data analyst role? And to nest that into this conversation, I don't think really, if you want to be a data analyst, I don't think there's anything that you should do intentionally to try and get you into being a data analyst. I just think you can transition out of those things into data analytics. What do you think?
It's funny they ask this. My first job title was business intelligence analyst, and then it was senior data analyst. But at the company I was at, the two were synonymous. There was no difference between a business intelligence analyst and a data analyst. I think, I don't know, it's one of those buzzwords, people of that kind of word and decision, intelligence. And there's a whole plethora of job titles that are related to data analyst. And so I think it differs from company to company. I do understand your point, though, that if you want to be a data analyst, you can't limit your mindset to, I have to have this job title in order to become a data analyst, or I have to do this course to become a data analyst. There's 1,000 roads that lead to being a data analyst, and many of them are great, and some of them are not so great. And so you kind of just have to play it out and hope for the best.
I think also, going back to the other things you've said in the conversation, I was thinking a lot. Okay, so you may have heard that Google just released their advanced analytics course, and everyone is talking about it. And I'm like, listen, none of you were talking about taking a course in machine learning until Google came out with this advanced analytics course. So you should question if you actually want to take it, or if it's just shiny object syndrome. However, I was thinking back on how I'd taken the Google certificates course, just the basic one. It was my gateway into analytics. It was when I thought I was still going to analyze spreadsheets as a hobby and get paid $20 an hour to do it, and then become an occupational therapist. And I really loved the course. I really enjoyed it. But when I was in the course, I literally could not there was no thought in my mind about this idea of business intelligence or whatever, because it just seemed to me like being a data analyst was using, and I'm sure they said things in the course. I'm not hating on the course. I'm sure that they said things in the course, but I ignored them, because what I heard was you need to learn SQL, you need to learn Excel. It taught R as well. And that's what I heard. And I was like, that's what data analytics is. And so, color me surprised when I, get into my job interviews and I realized that really what they're looking for is someone who could solve business problems. And then I get into my job and actually the most valuable things that I'm doing is the business intelligence side of it and not the data analytics side of it. And you said you really like to kind of marry both of them together. So one thing that I have seen people go back and forth on a lot lately is like people will say, well, business analyst or business intelligence is a different role than data analyst. And I don't think I agree with that. What do you think?
I mean, yeah, that's really tough. I can understand like the syntax of the difference between the two, you know, according to the definitions of the words. But I think you can't even say that every data analyst does the same thing, you know, like they have the same exact title and they could use completely different tools and have completely different workflows. And so I think it's maybe an unfair comparison.
That's good, actually, because I was wondering if maybe I was just biased because I was consulting. So obviously there's going to be more business stuff, but you have worked in a role for one company and you still feel like they're kind of really joined together.
Yeah,
so
I do.
There was something along the lines of those, and I just lost my question on it. Do you have any questions for me? I'm trying to remember what my question was. It was a good one.
I know there were some questions we didn't get to in the comments.
Well, yeah, there was actually John said something good that I should say, especially for one who ends up on YouTube. Wow, where did you say it, John? John said something. There it is. He said, so this was about interviewing and green flags when it comes to culture. He said, ask uncomfortable or difficult questions. How do you handle underperformers? What is your approach to career development and progression? And what has kept you at the company for X years? You know, I would feel so uncomfortable asking those questions. Like, do you think you could like really ask those with a straight face without like just sweating bullets?
I asked the last one. I try to ask that with every hiring manager. Unless they've been at the company less than a year, then maybe I won't ask that question. But it's really eye-opening because people have completely different answers. And I feel like people are mostly honest when they answer this question. They don't want to lie and say that they're staying at the company for a reason they're not staying at it. There's obviously a reason that they're there. So that's a good one. But how do you handle underperformers? Ooh, that would be a tough question to answer. That'd be tough. But it's a good question because it'll open your eyes to how the company views, like, do they use a PIP program or do they, you know, it'll also tell you if you ask the hiring manager this, what's their management style too. It's like, are they just going to breathe down your neck about everything and micromanage you? You'll be able to tell from the answer to this question. Or are they, you know, a good manager who cares about their employees and they're going to have one-on-one conversations with you and try to help you, you know, understand the why behind they should perform better. So yeah, I think that's a great question. I've never asked it, but maybe I'll put it on my list to ask.
Yeah, the middle one, what is your approach to career development and progression? I saw somebody had asked me the other day, it was a message, somebody would message me and they were saying that they were wondering if they were being too sensitive. They said, I'm entry level, got a job a couple months ago, but my manager has not really done anything to help me like learn how to do my job. It's just kind of like been thrown into the fire. And like when I ask them, they're kind of passive aggressive about like, why don't you know how to do this? And they're like, is that my fault? Should I be like working extra hours to learn how to do those things? And like, I mean, obviously every company is different, but like in my opinion, a manager's job for an entry-level data analyst is to progress you in your skills. And like, if you're not getting to like a point where you could like get promoted or like really progress your skills after the first 6 months to a year, then like, what are they doing as your manager? You know, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it makes me think of my first manager that I had working in a data role, and they really did care about my progression. They took a chance on me. I really didn't know that much about data when I got the job, but they like threw me a bone and were patient with me, A, and B, gave me opportunities to learn more. They would ask me to QA code that they knew would stretch me a little bit. And so I would QA it and it would cause me to I remember specifically having to learn how the row number function worked in SQL because of a QA task I was given. And it was a great opportunity for me to learn. And my manager was really great at understanding my capabilities and what I lacked. And so she definitely didn't micromanage, which was really, really nice. And so, yeah, there's a balance, right? With everything, there's a balance. That's the answer to everything, right? But they they need to not micromanage, but also not like leave you just drowning and not give you an opportunity to learn. It's somewhere in the middle. You'll find that good managers will help you to learn and enable you to learn too.
Yeah, my manager's been really good about that. This one's a good one because you are job searching right now and you are among many people who have been laid off. Do you feel like the current data analyst market of job seekers is oversaturated?
That is tough. I think LinkedIn is saturated with job seekers. And so that kind of gives us a biased and skewed view because we see so many green banners on people's profiles. And the reason that they're on LinkedIn is to find a job. And then you see lots of people who will, disappear off of LinkedIn once they have a job, which is totally fine. I understand that. And so I actually don't think it's oversaturated. I think there is still plenty of opportunity. I can think back to multiple open positions that we had in the past and finding, it was difficult to find people. I think there's a lot of people who are trying to break into data. And so maybe those very entry-level jobs might be a little bit oversaturated, but I think that the more senior positions are really hard to fill. I've heard statistics about software development that I think also stand for data. It's something like every 5 years, there are 5 times as many, people in the space, or something like that. I can't remember the exact numbers, but once you get 5 years of experience, you're going to have more experience than 95% of people in the field, which is kind of weird to think about, but it's true for software development. And I think it's true a little bit for data. And so it makes it a little bit more hard to find senior data people right now because more and more companies are collecting data and they need analysts to help with it. And so, man, that's tough. I think I would say some jobs are oversaturated because they're remote or they're entry level, but I think there are still plenty of data analysts that are needed. I'll know more. I've only been unemployed for like 5 days, and so I'll know more in the future about what I think of whether it's saturated or not.
I wonder too, like if it's kind of the general leading advice is for entry-level people, you really need to know SQL, Excel, and a BI tool, because that's what you see in most of the job postings. But then every job posting has other, like a whole satellite of other potential options of things you need to know. And it seems like for entry-level roles, you kind of just like can come in and say, like, show that you have the ability to learn them. Whereas I imagine, like, I know for my company, we had a job posting open for a while for like a senior consultant who knows SQL, who knows Tableau, like actually knows Tableau. And it was a tough position to fill because it's really hard to find somebody who has like a consulting level of knowledge about Tableau, because like if you use Tableau at your company every day, you do the same things.
Yeah.
So just kind of that skill, like there's things in your portfolio that I didn't even, like, I'm not really sure, like I've seen the word, I think, but like I couldn't tell you what it means, and so you kind of, maybe it partially has to do with that, like kind of niching down of like you get a lot of experience in this skill, but then not that skill. And then do you just take it right over, or do you go to a new role? What do you think about that?
I think for the entry level positions, you need, like, there's a very bare minimum that you need to know, but you also need to know what you don't know just yet. Like you can know part of SQL and know that what a window function is, but maybe you haven't ever used one. And so you'll learn on the job if you can, get into that entry level position. But I think fortunately, data analytics is very transferable from one company to another. There's a lot of different other technical roles one can have where, you can code in JavaScript for the whole time you're at company A. And, that kind of sets you down this path where you only know JavaScript. And if you want to transition, it takes a lot of time and work, and the company has to take a chance on you. You have to restart over, it seems, if you want to, develop in Python. But fortunately, I think if you know Tableau, you'll understand how Power BI works and what the goal of Power BI is. You maybe have to understand, like BigQuery or something, to understand it better, or understand DAX. Yeah, I would say my advice for anyone is don't try to learn everything. Stick to a few, get really good at them, and the skills you learn from those will be transferable. learn Python really well. And if you have to learn R for another role, you'll understand how Python works and you'll be able to transfer that knowledge to R. You'll have to learn new libraries and new syntax, but you'll know how to solve problems like you talked about before. Data analytics is really just about solving problems. And so if you can learn enough about the tools on how to do it in one way, you can figure out how to do it in another way in half the time, a quarter of the time, when the time comes to maybe learn that skill.
Yeah, I agree with that. This is, I think, the first time I've ever seen a comment from YouTube on this, because people always look on LinkedIn. But it's 8:00 my time. I was just wondering, do you have any last parting thing that you would like to bestow on me specifically, but also everyone else before we go?
That's a great question. I would just say hang in there. If anyone's out there trying to transition into data, you can do it. It's definitely possible. If my prior employee took a chance on me and they let me in, they'll let you in. I really didn't know much when I was starting out. I knew just enough to be able to speak intelligently about it and learn the rest on the job. And so, yeah, I would say just hang in there, everybody. Anyone who else is job searching, use your network. It's way more effective than just cold applying to jobs. I'm finding that out myself firsthand, and it's cool to see that networking, is a door that opens up for you. But yeah, thanks so much, Andy, for having me. It's really been fun chatting with you. I've enjoyed your other coffee chats, and so it was a pleasure to be on it myself.
Thank you. It's fun chatting with people who have really similar brains to me. Thanks to everybody in the comments who came and commented and watched along. I also really appreciate you guys being here. So I'm going to sign off, and good night, everybody.
Great. Thank you, everybody.